What's going on, world? I'm Eric D. Seals. I've worked as a DP on documentary, broadcast, and museum projects, the kind of work where the camera you actually choose matters. And the more cameras that come out, the more I think filmmakers need to understand the business behind the gear, not just the specs. So I want to look at this differently, not just what the FX5 specs are, but why Sony would make the camera in the first place, why they name it the FX5 instead of the FX6 Mark II, and why so many camera companies are making their lineup more confusing. So here's the thing, camera companies, they have to release products. That's not a conspiracy, that's just business. So when a camera like the FX5 shows up, the easy thing is to talk about specs. The more interesting thing is to ask why it exists at all. So there's plenty of videos that go into the details of these different specs and features that the FX5 is supposed to have. This is more so about the why, and I think the why is important for you to understand, and it can help shape your buying habits. On a real production day, I'm usually not thinking, oh, I wish I had open gate right now. I'm thinking about reliability, internal NDs, audio, media, battery, how fast I can move, whether the client trusts the image, and whether the camera helps me get the scene without slowing the job down. The specs get the attention, but the bigger question is why Sony would even create this lane in the first place, and that's something that I've constantly been asking myself. Because honestly, the naming doesn't really make sense. If this is the kind of camera conversation you want more of, not just specs, but what this stuff actually means for working filmmakers, do me a favor and subscribe. I do a new episode every week just like this. Sony used to be easy to understand, and I honestly mean that in a compliment. For a while, Sony's lineup made a lot of sense. You might not have liked every camera, but you understood why each one existed. Mirrorless had a lane, cinema had a lane, the FX3 made sense when it came out, the FX6, the FX9, the Venice, they all had a perfect place in the lineup of filmmaking. Now it feels like those lineups are starting to blur, and maybe that's not an accident. So when I'm choosing between the FX3, the FX6, the FX9, or another camera body, I'm not just asking which camera is newer. I'm asking what kind of day is this going to be? Am I handheld all day? Do I need internal NDs? Is this going to have an interview component? Is the client going to be in the room for me? Is this a lot of verite? Are there two cameras on the shoot? That's how working camera decisions actually happen. But when companies start filling every little space between the cameras, the ladder gets hard to climb because you can't tell which step you're actually on. The lines, they're getting blurry. And this is where the FX5 rumor gets more interesting to me because it feels like Sony is taking pieces from different cameras and mixing them into new bodies, a little FX3, a little FX6, a little Venice, a little creator camera, a little cinema camera, and now the question becomes, what is this thing actually supposed to be? So if you start to look at the camera that was most recently released, the FX2, you start to see the ideology of Sony being brought out because a lot of people, when the FX2 came out, including myself, was like, why does this camera exist? The FX2 is a direct predecessor to why we have the FX5. Open gate is a perfect example of how camera conversations get weird online. People complain on when a camera doesn't have it, and I get why. It can be useful for anamorphic, vertical crops, horizontal crops, reframing, and getting more out of the sensor. But most filmmakers aren't losing work because they don't have open gate. That doesn't make it useless. It just means that we have to separate useful features from features we were trained to feel insecure about. So up until this point, for the type of projects that I work on, open gate has not been requested once or even mentioned, or am I able to do it? I think most of the open gate conversations come from other filmmakers, which is to no surprise. But until producers can really grasp the importance, then I don't think it's gonna be something that we need to really worry about. Global shutter, that's different. That's a feature I understand and people being excited about it because it can solve a real problem. Rolling shutter shows up in fast movement, handheld work, whip pans, flashes, action. While I'm not seeing them as much in documentary, it does happen. Those moments are where the image starts to feel ugly and digital. But even then, the question is the same. Is rolling shutter actually holding you back or your work? Or did someone on YouTube just teach you need to care about this? Ask yourself how many times rolling shutter has ruined a take. For me, maybe one in 10 years. in a car, like I did a whip pan or something like that, but it's not something that happens on a regular basis. There are shoots where I can look back and say, yes, built-in ND made the day easier, or better audio inputs mattered, or ergonomics helped me move faster, but I can't say OpenGate would have saved most of those jobs. That's how I separate real production needs from a spec sheet desire. And this is why the name, it really does matter. Why not the FX6 Mark II? This is the question that I keep coming back to again and again. If the FX5 is taking some of the FX3 energy and some of the FX6 energy and maybe some higher end cinema stuff from the Venice, why create a new number? Why not just call it the FX6 or the next FX6 Mark II? I think the answer is simple actually. A Mark II replaces something, a number creates desire. So the name of the cameras, the title, the number, these are very important things. They have research companies that are spending millions of dollars to figure out if the number should be this number or a continuation of that camera. What you need to understand is no Mark II means no direct loser. So when you look at the FS7 or the C300 Mark I, II, and III, you are now having people say, do I need the next iteration of it? But when you change the number, you can't directly compare it to its predecessor as easily. And so what that does is that starts getting people to think, I need this new camera even though I already own an FX6. A new number also protects something very important, resale value. When people don't have the old version of something, they have the modern version of something. When you have an FX6 Mark II, that changes the value of the Mark I. Instantly, as soon as it's announced, things change. But if you don't have the same number, the resale value of that camera can stay the same or similar to. You start to compare it to a gap, not a rival. So now you're in between two different cameras instead of replacing one of your old cameras. When you have a different number, reviewers cannot cleanly call it an upgrade because it's different now. Call it the FX5 and Sony never has to answer that. It becomes something else, smaller than the FX6, more serious than the FX3. The FX3 owner thinks, maybe this is my next camera. This is my next step. The FX6 owner thinks, maybe this is my smaller B cam. The A7S III owner thinks, maybe this is my way into that cinema line. Sony doesn't need everyone to buy the FX5. They just need everyone to wonder if they're the person who it was made for. When something's called Mark II, I think replacement. When something gets a new number, I start asking where it fits. That's a different feeling. That's not just product design, that's marketing design. And Sony's not the only one doing this. The whole industry is starting to feel like every company is adding steps between the steps. So understand, the industry is building ladders. This is the part I teased at the top. The ladder that never ends, because the FX5 isn't really the problem. It's just the newest example. And then when you start putting cameras in between the cameras that are already there, you're filling another gap. And that gap becomes want. And a want is not a need, but it's a reason that so many people are buying equipment that they don't need. Red's had this problem for years. Great cameras, but for the average person, the names can feel like a decoder ring sometimes. Canon themselves are doing the same thing. You have the C50, the C70, the C80, the C400, R5C, plus hybrid bodies that are doing serious video work. Sony's not alone here. This is where the whole industry is starting to go. Every company wants to cover every possible buyer. Beginner, creator, solo operator, documentary, DP, commercial shooter, broadcast team, cinema crew. The problem isn't that choice is bad. Choice is a great thing. The problem is that too much overlapping choice makes people buy emotionally. Instead of asking, what problem do I need to solve? They ask, which camera am I supposed to want next? That's the danger. They don't have to make your camera bad. They just have to make it feel incomplete. I can know I don't need a camera and still find myself watching 5 videos about it. That's the thing. The marketing works even when you know it's marketing. Because camera companies, they aren't only selling what the camera does. They're selling what you imagine you could become with it, and that's the thing you have to keep in mind. So if the FX5 is real, the question isn't just whether it has global shutter, open gate, or a perfect spot between the FX3 and the FX6. The real question is whether it solves a problem in your work or whether it just makes your current camera feel unfinished. That's the difference between buying like a filmmaker and buying like the market trained you to do.